The air in the restaurant was thick with the scent of expensive steak and aged wine, but all I could smell was the metallic tang of my own adrenaline. I was sitting in a high-backed velvet booth, the kind that offers just enough privacy to feel secluded, but just enough exposure to be seen if someone looked closely. 2 feet away, on the other side of the velvet partition, my husband, Julian, was leaning in close to a woman I had never seen before. He leaned in so close that his forehead almost touched hers. Then he whispered it. The words weren't meant for me, but they hit me like a physical blow. He told her that the divorce papers were already drawn up, that the offshore accounts were secured, and that I wouldn't have a single cent to my name by the time the weekend was over. He laughed. It wasn't a loud laugh. It was that soft, private chuckle he used to give me when we were first dating. I sat there, my hand frozen on my wine glass. I didn't shake. I didn't scream. I didn't storm around the partition to throw my drink in his face. I simply listened. I listened as he described me as a necessary stepping stone that he was finally done using. I listened as he promised this woman, Sarah, that our beach house, the one my father had left to me, would be theirs by Monday. My heart was thumping against my ribs, but my mind was beginning to do something it had always been good at. It was starting to calculate. Julian thought he was the smartest person in the room. He always did. That was his greatest strength in business, and I realized in that moment it was going to be the very thing that destroyed him. Julian and I had been married for 8 years. I had met him when he was a struggling junior architect, and I was already managing my family's real estate portfolio. I saw potential in him. I saw drive. I poured my resources, my connections, and my personal capital into his firm. I made him. Over time, I stepped back to let him shine, believing that a marriage was a partnership where one person's success was shared by both. I had been foolish. As I sat in that booth, listening to him detail how he had spent the last 18 months slowly siphoning funds from our joint ventures into shell companies, the fog of the last 8 years finally cleared. He wasn't just cheating on me, he was erasing me. I waited until they stood up to leave. I kept my head down, hidden by the menu, watching through the reflection in the window as they walked out into the cool evening air, his hand resting possessively on the small of her back. Once they were gone, I didn't cry. I pulled out my phone and made a single call, not to a friend, not to my mother. I called a man named Elias, a forensic accountant I had hired 3 weeks ago when I first noticed a discrepancy in the quarterly tax filings for the Vance Holding Group. "Elias," I said, my voice sounding strangely calm even to my own ears. "You are right about the offshore movements, but there's more. He's moving on the beach house property this weekend. I need the bypass keys for the internal server tonight." "Are you sure you want to go through with this, Clara?" Elias asked. "Once we trigger the internal audit, there's no stopping it. It will flag everything to the board." "I'm sure," I replied. "He thinks he's playing a game of checkers. I need you to show him that the board was never his to begin with." I paid the bill and walked out. The city lights seemed brighter, sharper. I drove home to our sprawling penthouse, a place that felt like a museum of his ego. When I entered, Julian was already there, humming a tune in the kitchen while pouring a glass of sparkling water. He looked at me with that same charming, deceptive smile. "Hey, honey," he said. "You're home late, working on the Miller deal?" "Something like that," I said, putting my keys on the counter. I looked at him, really looked at him. I noticed the tiny smudge of makeup on his collar that he hadn't noticed yet. I noticed the way he couldn't quite maintain eye contact for more than 3 seconds. "You seem happy tonight, Julian. Good day at the firm?" "Productive," he said, taking a sip of water. "Very productive. Actually, I was thinking we should sit down tomorrow and look at the restructuring for the beach house deed. With the new tax laws, it might be better to move it into the corporate trust. He was moving faster than I expected. He wanted the deed in the corporate trust because he had recently changed the bylaws of that trust to give himself sole signing authority. If I signed those papers, the house, the last piece of my father I had left, would be legally his to sell. "I'll think about it," I said, heading toward the stairs. "I'm tired, Julian. Let's talk in the morning." I went to my home office and locked the door. I didn't sleep. I spent the night on the dark web of our corporate finances. Elias had sent me the bypass keys. As I dug deeper, I realized the betrayal went further than just a mistress and some stolen cash. Julian had been using my personal identity to co-sign high-risk loans for his firm's failing projects. If those projects collapsed, and they were designed to, the debt wouldn't fall on the firm, it would fall on me personally. He was setting me up to be the fulcrum for his bad investments while he walked away with the liquid assets. It was a brilliant plan, honestly. If I hadn't been sitting in that restaurant, I might have walked right into the trap. Around 3 a.m., I found what I was looking for, a digital folder titled Project Phoenix. It contained the draft of a confession letter written in my digital handwriting style, claiming that I had been the one embezzling funds and that I was planning to disappear. He wasn't just going to take my money, he was going to send me to prison. The shock hit me then, a cold wave of nausea. This wasn't just a breakup, this was an execution. I took a deep breath and centered myself. I remembered what my father used to say, "Never show your hand until the other player thinks they've already won the pot." I began to work. I didn't delete his files. I didn't change the passwords. Instead, I mirrored them. I created a secondary set of documents that showed Julian as the sole architect of the loans. I redirected the Project Phoenix files to a secure cloud server that would automatically email the state attorney's office and every member of the board the moment Julian attempted to file the divorce papers. Then I did the one thing he would never expect. I left a small, intentional glitch in the accounting software, a glitch that only he would notice, something that looked like a mistake I had made while trying to hide money. I knew his pride wouldn't let him ignore it. He would think he had caught me in a lie. He would use it as his smoking gun. The next morning, Julian was unusually attentive. He made coffee. He talked about our future. He even suggested a weekend getaway. I played along. I was the perfect, unsuspecting wife. "About that deed restructuring," I said over breakfast, my voice steady. "I think you're right. Let's do it today. Why wait?" His eyes lit up. The predator had seen the bait. "That's my girl. I have the papers at the office. Why don't you come by around noon? We can sign everything and then go for a long lunch." "Sounds perfect," I said. Before I left for Julian's office, I made one more stop. I went to a small, unassuming law firm on the edge of town. Not our family lawyers. They were too close to Julian. I met with a woman named Elena, a specialist in white-collar crime and high-asset divorce. "I have everything," I told her, handing over an encrypted drive. "The mistress, the shell companies, the identity theft, and the Project Phoenix frame-up. I want him to think he's winning until the very second the handcuffs click." Elena looked at the data and whistled. "This is surgical, Clara. You're not just divorcing him, you're dismantling him." "He wanted a clean break," I said. "I'm just making sure the break is permanent." I arrived at Julian's office at exactly 12 p.m. The firm was bustling. People waved at me, calling me Mrs. Vance. They had no idea that their boss was a ghost. I walked into Julian's glass-walled corner office. He was sitting behind his massive oak desk, the papers laid out in front of him. Sarah, the mistress, was standing by the filing cabinet, pretending to be a temporary assistant. I recognized her immediately from the restaurant. She gave me a small, tight smile. "Clara, you're here," Julian said, standing up. "You know Sarah, she's helping us with the transition today." "Nice to meet you, Sarah," I said, looking her directly in the eyes. She blinked first. She knew. She thought she was part of the winning team. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. I sat down and looked at the papers. They were exactly what I expected. A total transfer of assets, a voluntary waiver of alimony, a complete surrender of the beach house. "Everything looks in order," I said. I picked up the pen. "Wait," Julian said, his voice brimming with fake concern. "Before you sign, Clara, there's something we need to discuss. I was looking at the audit logs this morning. There are some irregularities in your personal accounts, large transfers to offshore banks. Clara, if there's something you've done, I can help you, but only if you're honest." He was doing it. He was playing the Project Phoenix card right in front of me. He wanted me to be scared. He wanted me to sign out of fear, thinking he was my only protection against the crimes he had fabricated. "Irregularities?" I asked, tilting my head. "That's strange. I saw the same things, Julian, but when I tracked the IP addresses, they didn't come from my computer. They came from this office, specifically from your private server." The smile on his face faltered. "That's impossible. You must have misread the logs." "I didn't," I said, leaning back. "I didn't sign the papers." I set the pen down. "And I also didn't misread the conversation you had at dinner last night, the one where you told Sarah that I was a necessary stepping stone." The silence in the room became heavy. Sarah's face went pale. Julian's jaw tightened. He looked at the door, then back at me. His arrogance was struggling to process the fact that the dreamer had woken up. "Clara, I don't know what you think you heard." "I heard everything, Julian, and I've seen everything. Every shell company, every forged signature, every penny you took from my father's estate. It's all been documented, and it's all been sent." "Sent where?" he hissed. "To the board, to the IRS, to the state attorney, and to Julian Vane. Wait, that's you. But more importantly, I sent a special package to the investors of the South Ridge project. You know, the ones you lied to about the funding." Julian stood up, his face turning a dark shade of red. "You bitch! You think you can ruin me? I built this. I'll have you tied up in court for the next 20 years. You'll be broke before the first hearing." "Actually," I said, standing up to meet his gaze, "you're the one who's broke. Remember that glitch you saw this morning? The one you thought was me hiding money? That was a trigger. The moment you logged into your offshore accounts to verify my theft, you activated a transfer protocol I set up last night. Your accounts are empty, Julian. The money has been returned to the corporate treasury under a rectification flag. You have no liquid assets, you have no firm, and in about 3 minutes, you'll have no freedom." I looked at my watch. On cue, the elevator dings echoed through the hallway. 3 men in suits, followed by 2 uniformed officers, walked through the glass doors. Julian looked at Sarah, but she was already backing away, trying to distance herself from him. "Julian Vance?" the lead officer asked. "You're under arrest for grand larceny, identity theft, and corporate fraud." Julian didn't shout. He didn't fight. He just collapsed back into his chair, the weight of his own pride finally crushing him. He looked at the papers on the desk, the ones he thought would be my downfall. I picked them up, tore them in half, and dropped them on his lap. "The beach house stays with the family, Julian," I whispered, "just like my father wanted." As they led him away in handcuffs, the entire office watched in stunned silence. Sarah tried to slip away, but Elena was waiting for her at the reception desk with a subpoena. I walked out of that building and didn't look back. The aftermath was long and complicated, but I was in control. The board, terrified of the legal fallout, offered me Julian's seat. I took it long enough to stabilize the firm and then sold my shares to a competitor for twice what they were worth. I used the money to set up a foundation for women who have been victims of financial abuse. Julian is currently serving an 8-year sentence in a federal facility. Without his money and his status, he's nothing more than a number. He tried to call me once, begging for a settlement. I didn't answer. Sarah disappeared into obscurity after her reputation was shredded in the local papers. Turns out, Julian wasn't the only one she was assisting. Sometimes I go to the beach house. I sit on the porch and listen to the waves. It's quiet there. No whispers, no lies. Just the sound of a life that I reclaimed. People think that revenge has to be loud to be effective. They think you have to burn everything down. But the most powerful revenge is the kind that leaves the other person standing in the middle of a desert they built themselves, wondering how they didn't see the sand shifting beneath their feet. I wasn't a stepping stone. I was the foundation. And when the foundation moves, the whole house falls. If you've ever felt like someone was using you to get ahead, just remember you know the terrain better than they do. You just have to wait for them to take the wrong step. Would you like to hear about the time my mother-in-law tried to swap my wedding ring with a fake, only to realize I had already replaced her entire jewelry collection with glass?